Goeiedag. So, vanmiddag is my gas in hierdie derde episode van die Talon Tools-gesprek, Alex Harris. Nou, Alex het geen bekendstelling nodig nie. Hy is wêreldbekend as 'n avonturier, as 'n bergfietsryer. As mense die woord manga sê, kom Alex se naam outomaties op. So, Alex, goeiemiddag en dankie dat jy hier is.
Hi, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So Alex, ek het nou vir mense so 'n bietjie agtergrond gegee oor jou, maar dit sê nog nie die helfte van wie jy eintlik is en wat jy doen het. Gee ons net so 'n bietjie van 'n idee wie jy is en ja, waar pas jy in die storie in?
Look, who I am now is probably very different to who I was as a youngster and what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, when I got out of school, I joined the Air Force. I wanted to learn how to fly. I wanted to be an astronaut. And then that didn't work out, so I started climbing mountains and exploring. And all of those things have kind of prepared me for who I am today. And that's really at heart, still an explorer. I'm still passionate about pushing our boundaries, about understanding how we're wired, how our psychology works and what's possible. And so the manga, which is kind of the race I've created, is an expression of all of those things. So I guess in a simple way, I'm a race director, but in a little bit more complicated way, I'm a conduit to help people fulfill their potential and stretch them and push them and just compel them to do more and get more out of their life and their body.
Alex, ek weet jy het al baie groot goed in die lewe gedoen, onder andere Everest gesummit, wat min mense op aarde kan sê wel het dit gedoen. Ek weet een van my vriende het die ander dag gesê, as daar een mens is met wie hulle Everest ooit sal klim, dan sal dit jy wees. Maar vertel 'n bietjie van die ander goed wat jy ook al gedoen het in jou lewe, van die ander adventures wat jy aangepak het.
Yeah, well, thank you for that compliment. But you tell your friend that there's no ways I'm ever going back, so they're going to have to find someone else. I mean, for a long time we still do have a business that takes people up adventures around the world like Kilimanjaro. And so we helped facilitate them do a lot of the 7 summits. But in that journey, I was still keen to push boundaries that hadn't been done. And obviously Everest and the 7 summits for me was the start of the journey. And then I guess 2 of the bigger projects was to see if we could be the first Africans to walk unsupported to the South Pole, which had never been done. And that took us 65 days to do. And I understood why it had never been done by an African, because we just, we like the sun. We don't like the cold, period, Yeah. And that was probably still the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, I was miserable for most of those 65 days. And then, of course, the last sort of big adventure thing was being the first, one of the first humans to cross the Arabian desert, the empty quarter, unsupported. And that took us 40 days to walk through Oman and the Emirates. And that was a very special trip. I mean, there were some of the most physically hardest specific days of my life, but the overall adventure wasn't nearly as hard as the South Pole, because the sand has this ability to restore and motivate and inspire you in the evenings. And of course, the cold in Antarctica doesn't, but it was still difficult. But to be out in the sands for a month and a half, I mean, it was just an amazing experience and a real privilege. But, you need to be hungry to do these things, and you need to be younger to be hungry. So it's, I'm getting to a point now where my hunger is shifting, which is normal.
Ja, maar dit is nog steeds absoluut amazing wat jy al reg gekry het. Maar ek seker dat van baie mense sê vir jou, maar why? Hoekom doen jy hierdie goed? Wat is die rede agter alles?
So I guess part of the driving force in my life is being a Christian and understanding or trying to understand how God has made me. And that's an incredible journey, because you know that the answer to that question has to be incredible, amazing, unbelievable, because we're made in his image, but we're not given all the clues. We have to unpack how we're made. And that means we have to stretch ourselves, and we have to take risks, and we have to sometimes fail. And so it's been this underlying kind of motivating factor for me to just understand what God's put in. I remember studying sports psychology undergrad. We would joke there was a joke amongst the kind of newbies that you can't put in what God's left out, but most of us don't know what God's put in, and we just assume he's left it all out. And so for me, my life has really been just to understand what has God put in and not worry too much about what he's left out.
Sure, wow. Ek weet jy is ook baie aktief besig as 'n motiveringsspreker. Jy tree baie keer op en gaan praat met groepe mense. Maar wat is jou boodskap gewoonlik aan hierdie mense?
So it depends if I'm doing the Everest talk or the South Pole or the Arabian talk. They've got slightly different focuses, but really the underlying message is simple, and that is that irrespective of your business, irrespective of the sector you're in, your goals, the challenges are still fundamentally the same, and they're human challenges. They simply, how do we get on with the people around us? Because we're in this journey together. How do we understand them? How do we form a vision that takes in our differing expectations, our differing backgrounds, and work together and achieve a really difficult goal? And so while, a lot of people think they're never going to have a chance or even a desire to go up Everest, and so their challenges aren't going to be nearly as difficult. The reality is that the human challenge is, I think, the single most difficult challenge in our lives. How do we get on with people, and how do we share a journey, whether they're a competitor or a collaborator, for the good for both of us? And that's kind of really the gist of it. And then obviously using the Everest analogy or the South Pole analogy, I'll show some crazy photos, but the message is the simple, and it's fundamentally pinned on this assumption that most of us underestimate what we're capable of. And that's because we've never really dared to stretch ourselves to the degree that a mountain like Everest would naturally stretch you to discover, actually, what we're capable of infinitely more than we think, or than what we've been told.
Ja, dis baie waar. Ek weet met myself ook, as 'n endurance atleet, jy dink jy kan nie meer nie, en dan verras jy jouself en jy besef, maar ek kan nog bietjie meer en ek kan nog verder. Dit is ongelooflik wat jou lyf kan doen as jou kop sterk is. Alex, ek onthou jare gelede, seker, ek weet nie hoeveel jaar gelede nie, het ek een keer in die koerant, was daar so 'n klein beriggie gewees wat gesê het, dit was 'n Engelse koerant, en baie klein berig wat gesê het, hier's 'n nuwe fietsbresies wat gaan gebeur, moeilikste in die wêreld, en daar was 'n baie groot prysgeld gewees daaraan. Ek het nog gedink, sjoe, dis baie geld. En by die berig het daar gestaan, hierdie is Alex Harris se nuwe breinkind, die manga. En ek onthou in daai stadium met almal, daar was toe nou al ander goed gewees, maar die manga het baie uniek gelyk, en daar was nog nie so iets in die land gewees nie. En jy het gekom en iets begin wat nou ewe skielik weet almal van die manga, en dit is nou een van die groot byeenkomste in die land. So vertel ons net bietjie daarvan, hoe die idee by jou opgekom, en wat was die idee daar agter?
Sure, that's a tough question. And, to be completely honest, I have to take you back a few years to our business Explore. I was starting a family, kids. I mean, I've now got 4 kids. Our youngest kid is 10 months, believe it or not.
Dis dapper.
Yeah. You think the manga's tough, sure. But, I really just sensed a change in seasons coming, and that the desire to do big expeditions was decreasing. I didn't want to spend that amount of time anymore away. My risk profile was changing, but the only business I knew was expeditions. And so, I really was praying, to be honest, for an idea to just change the way that I could go about business, but still have the capacity to change lives, because that's what our touring business did, Yeah. And so, I mean, it sounds crazy, but the idea came from the Lord, to do the manga. And it wasn't just you wake up one day and you've got this crazy idea. The idea evolved, and but fundamentally, I personally had raced a lot of the conventional stage races like the Epic, And I'd also raced, and that's not my game because I'm more of an endurance athlete. So I'd race stuff like the Freedom Challenge, which is at the other end of the continuum. And those are just too extreme. But I noticed that there was an opportunity in the middle, maybe for a format that had the power of a race like the Freedom Challenge to profoundly affect someone's life, but not be 3 weeks or 2 weeks. And so the format was sort of evolved over a year or two around 1,000 Ks, 5 days. What I thought most amateur riders would be possible. And the rest is history. I mean, we were crazy. We had great sponsors in the early days, but the rand continued to plummet when we launched. And so we lost our prize money. And I must be honest, I mean, it was for the first few years, it was really touch and go. There were plenty of times that my wife said, look, you need to go and get a normal day job now. And the honest truth is I wouldn't know what to do in a normal day job. My skills are a very specific skill set. So we persevered. And thankfully, we've been blessed. We've had amazing favor with farmers, with permission, with riders. Our race is crazy. 1,000 Ks through the Karoo in 50 degrees. No one's died yet, which is just a miracle in itself. And so we're still evolving. I mean, I still have some ideas, and I'm still trying to be sensitive to my client base, which are riders, but still have fundamentally the opportunity for that individual to experience something radically life-changing, that they come away from the manga and they genuinely think differently about their life. And that for me, when I get an email from a rider who's had that experience, that just confirms you're on the right track. Maybe it's not perfect yet, but keep doing what you're doing. And that's kind of like how the manga came about. Yeah.
En baie van die mense wat ek ken wat dit al gery het, sê self, maar dit is regtig 'n lewensveranderende ervaring. Dit is net iets. En ek vra altyd vir hulle, maar wat maak dit so spesiaal? En mense kan nie sê nie, maar daar is net iets wat met jou gebeur as jy manga ry. So ja, dis ongelooflik.
Creative Equipment het al in 1979 begin handel dryf en doen tot vandag die invoere en verspreiding van 'n wye reeks kragprodukte en brandstof aangedrewe tuingereedskap. Met hulle Talon Tools-reeks gaan alles oor die voorraad en die vervaardiging van die sterkste gereedskap vir die moeilikste take.
Ons doel is om 'n wye reeks uitsonderlike produkte teen bekostigbare pryse te verskaf, reg oor Suid-Afrika, en die beste te bied in unieke rugsteuningsdiens en algehele toewyding aan ons kliënte. Kyk uit vir die Talon naamborde.
Talon weet dat jy in jou werk net die beste verwag en daarom word hulle reeks produkte noukeurig gekies vir kwaliteit en werksverrigting. Hulle het voorraadkundiges in alle groot sentrums vir jou gemak en die aanlyn winkel sal verseker dat jy die regte hulpmiddel vir jou werk vind. Creative Equipment, puikprodukte, professionele diens en langtermynverhoudings vir onderdele en naverkope diens.
Jy luister na Teresa Coetzee op Nuuspod.
Alex, maar jy is self 'n pa, jy het nou gesê jy het 4 kinders en spandeer jy meer tyd deesdae by die huis of probeer jy?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's and it's not just so I think COVID has helped.
No.
COVID has kind of pushed a lot of us back home, and you question why you need to be somewhere else. For me, an office is really administration, emails, relationships, because our work is all out in the field. It's meeting farmers or the logistics of the race day. And so it's just given me a chance to actually now spend a lot more time. And the desire also, because my eldest is 12, my girl, she's 12 already.
Sure.
And, everyone tells you that has kids that are older. It sounds so trite that, before you know it, it's gone. And I know that duality of time because of many, many years of expeditions and really ruthless situations. So I've become more intentional just about trying to structure my life and spend more time. And the other reality is, as you said, I'm almost 50. So my 10-month-old, when he's in his late teens, I'm going to be looking at 70 years old and he's going to want to go climb mountains. So I'm going to have to, stay fit and yeah, but that's a whole nother story. So.
Maar as jy vir jou kinders een les kan leer in die lewe en vir hulle raad kan gee oor een ding, wat sal dit wees?
It's never too late to try something new. You always think you're out of time, but it's never too late. and take the risk sooner while you're young. You've got your whole life to clean up the mess. Yeah, it sounds crazy, but
Dis
if it
goeie
goes
raad.
wrong.
Ek wens my pa het dit vir my gesê. Alex, is daar nog enigiets op jou bucket list? Ek weet jy was al reg oor die hele wêreld gewees. Jy het deur die Avonturier hoeveel keer gedoen van waar jy in Amerika fiets gery het van die noorde in Amerika af al die pad suide toe. Hoeveel keer het jy dit gedoen?
3 times, yeah.
Yes. Ja, maar is daar nog enigiets wat jy dink, ek sal dit nog wil doen?
I no longer have the desire. I mean, there were big mountains that I wanted to go and try, like K2, but thank the Lord, those desires have slowly changed. So, in terms of big objectives, no, they're all past now. I mean, I'm still an ultra endurance racer, and maybe I've got a few more years. There's evidence that sort of this period is really suits the ultra endurance, late 40s, early 50s. So, in that, I'd like to go back to the Tour Divide, give it one more go. I left a lot of time out the course, and then there's a crazy race called the Barkley Marathons. I'd like to give that a go. But they're really obscure events. So for me, it's the bucket list stuff has now become, trying to pour my energy in the other direction and try and understand what might one day be on my kids' bucket list, and they might want me to do that or be with them on that, So yeah, I mean, other than those two sort of races, the Tour Divide again and the Barkley Marathons, which is a pretty crazy race. Yeah, I mean, I've almost, I won't say I've successfully, but I'm almost escaped the prison of ambition, almost.
Ek weet, jy het een keer vertel met een van die Tour Divides, het julle beere gekry, regte beere in die
Ja.
Vertel ons net 'n bietjie daarvan asseblief.
Yeah, so the Tour Divide it's the granddaddy of the ultra endurance races. It's it's one of the longest standing, and it goes from Canada all the way down the Rocky Mountains through the US to the Mexican border. So it's about 4,300 kilometers. It's in the middle of summer, but if it's been a really bad winter and the upper states, so the race starts in Canada, it's about 200 miles to the US border. You cross the US border, then you're in the states of Montana, Wyoming, you cut a little bit of Idaho into Colorado, and then New Mexico, and then the Mexican border. But those upper states, so sort of Wyoming, Montana, and the Canada section, if it's been a really bad winter and there's still a lot of snow lying on the ground in the summer, it pushes the bears way down the valley to forage. And so my second race had, it had been such a bad winter. And so even though it's the middle of summer, you still have sub-zero, -4 degrees. I had the one night. Oh. And I saw that one race, I saw 5 bears. I saw a black mother and her cub. And generally the black bears are not as fearsome. And then I saw 2 grizzlies. I was going pretty fast. The black bears I saw 10 o'clock at night. They were just leaving the road into the forest. But the next morning I was coming down a road at about 30 k's an hour, and it had these sort of humps in the road. So I couldn't really see, more than 400 meters. And as I came over the one hump, there were 2 grizzlies about 100 meters down in the road. And the rangers brief you that when you come across a grizzly, you've got really just a second or two to kind of just take dominance. And the thing to do is to shout, "Go bear, go bear," and to do it really quickly and really loudly. And so obviously, as I came over the rise, I saw these 2 grizzlies, and I shouted that really loud. And they got up. I mean, they were, one of them was like grumbling, but they both luckily bumbled off the road into the forest, and I never saw them again. But it's a pretty intimidating thing coming across 2 grizzlies, because they're huge. And in fact, about a year after that, a rider was killed, not in a race, but just recreationally riding near the Tour Divide by riding into a grizzly coming around the corner. You're supposed to carry bear spray, but of course they're really big cans. And so the guys who race the Tour Divide are at the front. All we carry is a whistle, and then you're just blowing it. Look, I blew it a lot, because it's pretty intimidating. But it's an amazing experience. And to be honest, it's not a real. They say if you camp in the forest, make sure your food is tied in a tree 20 meters away. And by and large, they genuinely, and as I say, most seasons, the snowfall isn't that low down. And so you don't see bears. It's quite rare because you make a lot of noise on the bike and they tend to drift.
Ja.
But that particular year, I saw 5 within 2 days. I mean, it was amazing.
Wel ek seker 'n Afrikaanse voetsak sou ook gewerk het.
I think so, but I wasn't going to experiment.
Alex, my laaste vraag aan jou is, deur al hierdie omswerwinge en deur alles waardeur jy al is daar iets spesifiek omtrent jouself wat jy geleer het en wat jy weet van jouself waarmee jy kan afsluit?
Sure, something I learned about myself.
Ja.
So I've been at this game for 50 years now, answering what's in there. And I still don't know 100%. And that's the most incredible lesson, is that we can be intentional about pushing and asking questions, but it'll take our whole life to discover who we really are. And unfortunately, some of us stop asking that question when we're young, and they get to an old age and they still don't know who they are, And so for me, it's that I've only begun to understand how I've been made, and it's taken a life of intention. It's been a passion and obsession of mine, and that blows me away. And so, I almost wish I had started this journey earlier. That I as a kid would stretch myself more, and that's kind of what we try and do now with our kids, is just stretch them so that they, even as youngsters, get to start just a glimpse of who they really are. That's for me is the key. Most people don't know who they are and what they're capable of, and so they just assume they're probably not able to do that. And I would argue that most times they're wrong. We can do far more than we ever imagined, but we have to ask ourselves, what it is that we can do.
Ja, so. Dis goeie raad. Dankie Alex, en ja, ek wil net dankie sê vir Talon Tools dat hulle hierdie reeks vir ons geborg het en moontlik gemaak het. Dankie Alex.
Absolute pleasure, man. Thank you.
Cheers.